Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church. Here I am in the middle of the week talking about this guy named Peter. We looked at Peter, who was this mountain of faith and trust in walking off his whole life before him to be with Jesus. Then we saw Peter, who was in a man of great faith and stepped out of the boat. I mean, let's face it, nobody else stepped out of the boat. I mean, you got to give him credit for that. Nobody else even offered to step out of the boat. Then, today, we want to see Jesus and Peter in a different manner. Chapter 18 of Matthew, verses 21 and 22. Then Peter came to him and asked, Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? And Jesus replied, No, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Peter comes to Jesus with a legitimate question. And he really wants to know. He really wants to do the right thing. And you know, I don't know what precipitated this conversation. The Bible doesn't tell us. But if you think about your life, how many times have you needed or someone done something that would involve a need for forgiveness? I mean, a lot of people don't forgive ever. They hold grudges. They go to their grave. Now, if you think about it, what good did that do? It didn't do the other fella any harm because they probably didn't even know about it. And as far as the one who needed to offer forgiveness, all it did was keep them in turmoil, hate and anger and disgust. That's no way to live. Physiologically, it destroys your systems. So Peter comes and he has this question, Lord, how many times do I forgive somebody who's offended me? 7 times? Peter thinks 7 times is quite a lot. And I suspect most people today would think 7 times is quite a lot. But yet, Jesus wants Peter to look bigger and look at the situation in a greater context. He says, no, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Well, technically, that would be 490 times. But effectively, what that means is an infinite number of times. So, how many times do you offer forgiveness? Well, according to Jesus, it's whenever you need it, regardless of how many times. Now, I know you're saying, oh, wait a minute, that's not fair. Well, I suppose from the standpoint of someone who doesn't really want to forgive, that's not fair. But from the standpoint of someone who has been forgiven, that's pretty good. Let's say, for example, let's look at it this way. Suppose you're, what would be, 37 years old. To get to 490 times of forgiveness, you would have to be forgiven 14 times every year. So out of 365 days, 14 times, you should be forgiven. That's not very much. I mean, some folks need forgiven every couple of days. If you're 75 years old, then you need forgiven 7 times a year. That's nothing. That's not even once a month. So if we only need forgiveness ourselves 490 times, what about all the other times when we need it? What happens then? Oh, sorry, you met your limit. You're out of luck. If you're 50 years old and you've needed forgiveness 14 times a year, that'd be about a little over once a month, then for the last 12 and a half years of your 50 years, whatever you've done isn't eligible to be forgiven. If you live another 20 years, then for 32 and a half years, whatever you've done can't be forgiven. Is that really what you'd like? Well, I know there's some people who never do anything wrong. Maybe you're one of them. So it doesn't matter to you. But you know what? It will matter. There will come a time when there will be an accounting. And somehow you're going to have to answer Jesus' question. How many times do you forgive somebody? Now, I don't count the number of times I offer forgiveness. I don't think God wants us to do that either. What he wants us to do is just forgive. Now, forgive doesn't mean forgot. He's not asking us to not remember it. But forgiveness means that you take the hurt away. You remember it, but doesn't hurt anymore. A friend of mine a long time ago used the illustration of a bee sting. He says you get stung and it really hurts. And if you can take that stinger out, you remember the bee stinging you, but doesn't hurt anymore. That's what God wants from you and me. Okay, I grant you, it's hard. The world won't ask for that. But the world doesn't have eternity to offer either. But you know, sometimes when things are easy, they're not worth much. So you think about it. Here's Peter doing his best to do what God wants. And he still has much to learn. I got a lot to learn. Kind of bet you do too. Thanks for listening. If you have any concerns, let us know. We'll do everything we can as fast as we can to help meet your need. You take care. I'll be back tomorrow with another passage and story about this man, Peter.